You're listening to Big World Network.
Winged Destiny, Episode 1, written and read by Philip McCormick. Desires and adorations, winged persuasions and veiled destinies, splendours and glooms, and glimmering incarnations of hopes and fears, and twilight fantasies, and sorrow with a family of sighs, and pleasure, blind with tears, led by the gloom of her own dying smile, and a state of eyes come in slow pomp. Percy Bysshe Shelley, Adonai. The keepers were near, very near. Marley could almost smell them. If not for the alertness of Bone, his lurcher, he would have blundered into the trap. He lay still beneath the briar, feeling the painful prick of the thorns. He tested the wind against his face, beginning to sweat now that he was in danger. His worst fear for the moment was that the gamekeeper's dogs would get his scent. If that happened, he was in for a severe drubbing. Nicholas Jeffers, the head gamekeeper to Lord Brownlow, was notorious for his rough treatment of poachers. It was known that he carried a vicious truncheon, a blackthorn handle about 18 inches long, from which an ebony knob about the size of a baby's fist was suspended on a short chain. Using this fearsome weapon, Jeffers had in the past beaten men into insensibility, and in a number of cases the victims never recovered from the beating. Marley knew that if Jeffers caught him, he would expect no mercy. For too long, Marley had thumbed his nose at the Charnwood forest gamekeepers. Jeffers had sworn to catch the youngster and stop him once and for all from poaching on Lord Brownlow's estates. If that meant crippling Marley to achieve that end, the gamekeeper was willing to do just that. The gamekeeper had partridge rearing pens inside the forest boundary, nurturing them for his master. When the chicks were fully grown, Lord Brownlow would invite his friends for a week of entertainment. There would be dinners at the big house and daily shoots. Dozens of birds would be slaughtered, as titled men and women shot the prey driven towards their guns. It would be a week of feasting and drinking and pleasurable killing. Now Marley was caught red-handed. He was out in the night with his nets and his dog. It was obvious that the poacher was engaged in a trapping expedition. Marley had an order from a gamekeeper in the neighbouring county of Nottinghamshire to supply any amount of game birds for his own shoots. The business had been too good to turn down, and now Marley was paying for his eagerness to make some much needed money. Slowly, trying to move as silently as possible, Marley began to slide the strap of his satchel from his shoulder. The bag contained his nets and pegs, and if he was caught with the equipment, it would mean not only the vicious beating from Jeffers, but also a visit to the magistrate's court. He had to ditch the evidence. If they found him with the bag, the beating would be only the beginning of the punishment. A smell in prison would be on the cards also, and Marley couldn't bear the thought of being confined for any length of time, away from his beloved woods and meadows, and who would look after his dogs? Marley pushed the bag deeper into the bush, which was proving difficult as the material snagged on the thorns. Wary of making a noise, the poacher kept at his task until the bag was wedged under the bush and hopefully out of sight of a casual observer. Now the poacher only had to ease out from his hiding place and disappear into the night. If apprehended, he had nothing incriminating in his possession. He would surely get a beating, but at least he wouldn't go to court. Bone had settled beside him, and Marley reached out and touched the dog. It was a signal that they were ready to move. The dog stiffened, and Marley tensed also, knowing Bone had sensed something. And sure enough, he heard footsteps approaching. "Mason," a voice called out. "It's Jeffers. I'm coming in." Jeffers was being cautious. A man coming unexpectedly up to gamekeepers on night watch might get his head bashed in, or even a barrel of birdshot in his brisket. "Okay, Mr. Jeffers. It's been a quiet night." Marley was in imminent danger of being discovered as the head gamekeeper came on. A snap of his fingers, and Bone took off, the furtive movement alerting Jeffers, skilled in reading noises and movements in the wood. "What's that? Who's there?" There came a click of a gun being cocked, and then Marley moved, hurling himself at the keeper and knocking the man sideways. Jeffers had the presence of mind to shout a warning. "Halt, or I fire!" Then Marley was past and running like the devil was after him, and congratulating himself on escaping the trap that had been laid for him. The shot was extremely loud in the stillness of the night. Marley felt something punch him in the back, and then he was tumbling over and over, feeling as if a giant hand had hit him. "Oh, fuck!" Gasping for breath, he staggered to his feet again and stumbled on, feeling a numbness in his back and something wet leaking down inside his trousers. Behind him he could hear Jeffers shouting, "To me! Intruder! This way!" Hard to keep going, legs pumping, driving forward. No pain just yet. He had no illusions. He knew he had been hit, but he was still able to move. Fuck! The crashings of body through the woods, making no attempt at stealth. There was no need for stealth, now they had a wounded quarry to pursue. Then the dog started barking. Marley blundered on, making no attempt at concealment. The hunt was up and in full cry. He had to keep going and get as far away as possible. "Over here! Spread out! I think I hit him!" Legs pumping, lungs driving forward, one foot forward, followed by the other. The shouts behind and the dogs barking. That was a danger. Marley knew from the timbre of the barking what was coming after him. Bull mastiffs, big dogs, capable of bringing down a man and holding him until the keepers arrived on the scene. He could hear them getting nearer. Marley ran on, staggering as he went. He would be leaving a blood trail for the dogs to follow. Reluctantly he drew his skinny knife. It was against his nature to harm a dog. After all, he depended on his own animals to help him steal the game from the estates that were his raiding grounds, and a high-quality dog was worth good money in the hunting world. But he knew he was in desperate straits. It was now a matter of survival. Something cannoned into the back of his legs, and he stumbled and went down. Felt the hot breath of the mastiff on the back of his head as it straddled him. Drove back with a knife, a deadly sliver of steel, honed to razor sharpness, not quite knowing where he was striking, but aiming for the neck and the head. The knife met resistance, and he sawed at the obstruction. Hot blood spurting, landing on the back of his head. A choking, whining noise from the dog. Marley put his hands underneath and pushed upwards. hearing the dog mewling and choking on blood. Pausing only to swipe the mastiff once across its throat, to put it out of its suffering, Marley began running again. He had no idea where he was going. Only an instinct for survival kept him moving, the stinging agony in his back almost unbearable, his lungs burning as he laboured to keep going. There was a sudden howling behind him as the other dogs found the dead mastiff. Angry shouts followed the keepers caught up with the dogs. Going forward only by sheer willpower, Marley felt regretful for the mastiff's death. It was him or me, he muttered in an attempt to ease his conscience. He stumbled on, suddenly losing his footing and pitching forward into the water, the Charn, a rivulet running through the wood. Marley clambered to his feet, water cascading off his clothes. He turned right and kept going, trudging along in the water course, forcing one foot in front of the other. The pain in his back spread through his body. He made no attempt at keeping quiet as he splashed through the stream. The noise of barking dogs and shouting men effectively cloaked any noise he was making. It was an endless journey of numbing pain and tumbling into the water and struggling to his feet again and going on. He was becoming delirious. Someone was calling his name. "Marley, do not give up." He trudged through the water, head down, lifting waterlogged boots that were becoming heavier and heavier, staggering forward, his mouth open wide as he sucked in air into his lungs. Must lie down, must sleep. At some stage he must have left the stream, for he suddenly found he was on dry land, trudging uphill, one step at a time. It was only willpower that drove him forward. It was just him and the agony in his body and the need to keep moving, with no idea where he was or where he was going. Uphill. So hard to lift his boot. Put it down on the ground. Lift the other. Somehow his feet had been replaced by boulders. He must have picked them up in the stream. "Keep going, Marley. Help is on hand." A small shape appeared in front of him, panting, with tongue dangling, tail waggling. "Bone!" He was on his knees, not knowing how he got there. He struggled to get up, but his strength drained away. Sleep. Must sleep. Rest a moment. Lying on his face, smelling the earth, rich and pungent in his nostrils. "Good dog. Give the dog a bone." Bone licking his face, whining. Black Annie, they called her. It was because of the black clothes she always wore. Black Annie bothered no one, living the lonely life of a hermit in her cave up on Bardon Hill. Folk alleged she was a witch, and when she appeared among them they made the thumb and finger sign against the evil eye. Some of the more devout crossed themselves in the manner of Christians. The only person to visit Black Annie in her lonely cave was the young poacher Marley Fox. It was a strange relationship, but one that was beneficial to both. Marley supplied the recluse with the fruits of his poaching, and in return Black Annie imparted knowledge to the youngster. She also used her extensive powers of healing on him when he injured himself in the course of his trade. His dogs, when the need arose, were also treated. Tonight she sat by her fire, seeing things in the flames and embers that no one else would have recognised. There was always a fire inside the cave for warmth and companionship. After all, there was a nearby Charnwood forest to harvest an endless supply of fuel. The interior of the cave was hazy with smoke, for ventilation was not good, but this did not bother the recluse. The soot darkened her appearance so she could live up to the name Black Annie. An owl hooted nearby, and immediately the semblance of the same bird materialized within the red and gold of the glowing embers. As the witch watched, the bird fluttered wildly, and another bird appeared in the flames. An eagle with wide wingspan swooped down on the smaller bird. With a flurry of movement, the owl swerved, and the eagle had to be content with the spray of feathers torn from his prey. Thus began an aerial battle, as the eagle swooped after the owl that was just able to keep ahead of those fearsome talons. The coals shifted, and the vision disappeared in a flurry of sparks and tiny flames, almost feather-like in their shape. What does it mean? Who is the eye, and what is that eagle? Surely there had been other fairy visions showing animals or birds in mortal combat. A lion chasing a wolf, a fox pouncing on a stoat. It was perplexing, and Black Annie spent many of her lonely hours pondering on the meaning of the visions. There was a slight noise by the cave entrance. At one time, her friend Marley had fashioned a willow gate, hinged to make it easier to open and shut. Someone or something was scratching at the gate. She guessed from the faint noises it was an animal. And it was a fact. When the animals of the locality were in distress, they would come to the cave for assistance. Black Annie rose from her chair, made from apple boxes and covered in fabric. "I'm coming, never fear." She scraped back the gate and saw the dog. "Bone, what is it, little one?" The lurcher looked up at the witch, then twisted its head and looked back over its shoulder. Turning back to her, it crouched down and stared up at her with pleading eyes, all the while whining in a most pathetic manner. "Dear God, it is your master. What is it? Is he in trouble?" The dog stood upright again, took a few steps back, and gave a couple of short barks. For long moments the witch stood staring off into the night, as if by her powers she could conjure up the night's happening out in the woods. It has begun. I fear it has begun.
You're listening to Big World Network.
Music by Kevin MacLeod.